And we are live. Welcome to this live edition of Taking Into Account. This will be Taking Into Account episode 46. And because it's kind of a bit of an impromptu stream, only gave folks about a 30 minutes heads up on the stream. I will wait a little bit before we get into the show, but I will interact with you guys in the chat for a bit. So give me just a second here. Let me get set up. Yeah, we have several people already in the YouTube chat. Mr. Ben Fitzpatrick is in the chat, or as I like to call him, Ben Fitzmagic. He works a lot of magic with Gentoo and the Mac OS, Mr. Hackintosh himself. All right, Bread Moth is in the chat. How you doing, Bread Moth? Prothic, I hope I pronounced your name right. He says hi. How you doing? Yeah, Roy, how you doing? Frostbite, Bob. Trijex, I hope I pronounced that right. I subscribed to your channel the other day, by the way, but I'm still not quite sure on the pronunciation of that. Let's see. Yeah, Ghost, how you doing? Chris says, hey, DT. Alan Pope, Mr. Popey himself, a bit clickbaity. I love clickbait, Alan. You know that. I never shy away from a little clickbait. It's what makes the internet go. Clickbait. Is this the Vegemite show? Says Total OS Today. I haven't eaten Vegemite in a long time, Toss. For those of you unaware, sometime last year, early last year, me and Toss and Colin at PC TLC, we started doing these like Vegemite challenges where we all ordered tubes or tubs of Vegemite and ate them live on some streams. And Vegemite wasn't horrible. It wasn't the worst tasting thing I ever ate. It actually, in some circumstances, I could see actually eating it. I'm sure it's fine on toast, on crackers. It's very salty. It almost has an anchovy-like quality to it. It's not something. It's an acquired taste, and it's only good in small quantities. I ordered a tube, like a toothpaste kind of tube of it, and I think I eventually got through about half of the tube before I just finally threw the rest of it away. Probably not something I will reorder. By the way, other than the YouTube chat, those of you, if you want to hang out in the DistroTube IRC chat over on the freenode network, we've got about 60, 70 people hanging out in the DistroTube IRC channel today. So, and back to the YouTube chat here. Yeah, Ben, I just saw you go live, Derek. I didn't see your answer, yeah? And DT goes fishing. He uses clickbait. Yep. Well, it's not really clickbait. I mean, it's clickbaity, but it's not my clickbait. It's actually somebody else's clickbait. I'm just copying their title. As far as I'm assuming you guys are talking about the Ubuntu story. What's the point of Ubuntu in 2020? Yeah, Ubuntu dies in 2020. I doubt Ubuntu is going to die anytime soon. There are way too many Ubuntu servers out there for Ubuntu to go away in the next year. Yeah, the Blue Moon Challenge would be much better, DT. Yeah, Blue Moon is a very nice beer. If you like those kind of Belgian white style beers, I mean, Blue Moon's alright, but it's an American version of those Belgian beers. A much more authentic Belgian white would be actual Belgian beers like Hoegaarden or Leffy, both fantastic beers, and they have that same kind of coriander hint to them. It's really great beers if you can find them. Hoegaarden I find here in some of my local stores occasionally. Leffy I have to search for sometimes. Usually specialty shops. Of course, Blue Moon you can find everywhere. And Blue Moon is not bad. So, I think it's immortal until the world turns to our Linux. Yeah. We are seeing more and more Linux adoption. Certainly Linux is on an uptick. Free and open source software in general is on an uptick. It seems like we're kind of winning the battle. At least that's what it seems like. As more and more large companies jump on the open source train. Yeah, Rudy says Dinklel. I've tried Dinkle. It's not bad. Ben says I'm going with Gentoo on my laptop on the PCIe SSD. Very cool, Ben. All right, we'll give it a couple of more minutes before we get into the show. So typically, you know, I pre-record these rather than doing these taking into account episodes live. The pre-recorded versions, I try to keep them around 30 to 40 minutes in length, obviously doing a live show because there'll be some interaction in between. This show is going to run certainly over an hour, maybe an hour and a half, but I don't want to get too long-winded here. So we will get on the ball pretty shortly here. Yeah, Total OS Today is using his new Chromebook for this one. Yeah, I saw that you bought a Chromebook, Toss, and that's pretty cool. I actually have been saying for the last couple of months I might buy a Chromebook myself just to check them out. I wouldn't mind one of the Pixel books. Kind of expensive, but they look like they're solid machines. One of the things I've been struggling with here, you guys know I started a new job about 3 weeks ago. So one of the reasons why content on the channel the last 2 or 3 weeks has slowed down a little bit. I haven't made as much content, and we're going to get back into making much more regular content, probably starting now. But those first couple of weeks at my new job involved some training and some traveling and things like that, so slowed down on the content the last couple weeks, but that's fine. I think it was a nice little break for me. It may have been a nice little break for you guys too. You guys don't need me to, you know, pump out a new video every single day. But the new job, back to the new job, I have an office and a computer, and you know, it runs Windows Server 2008. And it runs Internet Explorer is the browser. We use VMware Horizon. We use Outlook, of course, for our email. If we need to do any kind of file sharing, OneDrive. And of course, Microsoft Office 365 is our Office suite. It's like I died and I went to Microsoft Hill, you know, at this new job. So, yeah. Yeah, the cross-eyed gamer. Ooh, 2008. Yeah, well, at least it's Windows Server. You know, it could be worse. It could be, you know, Windows 10. And you know what? I mean, it's not like these aren't okay products. I mean, Office is okay. Office 365 even though I'd prefer the desktop client. The web client is okay. You know, OneDrive, yeah, I mean, it works. And they're all integrated with each other because they're all Microsoft products. So it's not like it's the worst experience, but yeah, I would prefer, you know, of course, all these computers and the whole network is locked down. You can't just install anything. But man, if I could get LibreOffice and Firefox on those computers, I don't know who I need to talk to. Yeah, I mainly work using Linux to enhance the network, yeah. Yeah, Werner says, it sounds like purgatory. Yeah. Office is unnecessary for personal usage. Actually, one of the stories we're going to get into, actually not today, but I may make a video tomorrow about people needing some of the proprietary software so many people claim they need, like Office, and somebody earlier in the chat, EasyNix, was mentioning the Adobe suite. I know a lot of people really want Linux clients for that software, but do you really have to have it? I know some people really do have to have it because of work. Some, you know, if your work, everybody at your office building, all 2,000 employees all use Microsoft Office. Yes, I get that you have to use Microsoft Office, but I think a lot of us we just want it because it's something we're comfortable with. We've always used it, especially new to Linux users. All you've ever used is Word and Excel, so you don't want to even try LibreOffice. But you know what? Give it a chance. In my last job, we had a pen and paper for creating docs. Actually, I prefer that, Master in the chat. I'm kind of old school, too. I don't mind doing things kind of in a retro sort of way. Pen and paper works. Yeah, I like, you know, old school ad machines, you know, even old school cash registers, you know, where you have the register tape and everything. You have to calculate everything by hand, you know. These modern POS systems, while nice, what happens when they go down? That's the thing, too, when you get so reliant on technology, when it breaks sometimes, you know, it breaks hard. All right, guys, let's go ahead and jump into things here. I think we given everybody a chance to get here. All right, so on this edition of Taking Into Account, we're going to discuss the Open Invention Network, which is a Linux-based patent non-aggression community that now has over 3,000 licensees. So it's got 3,000 members. Very cool. Also, what's the point of Ubuntu in 2020? What should Ubuntu be, and is it on the right path? We're going to discuss that today. Also, Lenovo is shipping Ubuntu Linux on 2019 ThinkPad P-Series models, which is really great. Always love seeing more OEMs shipping with Linux by default. Also, we're going to discuss an infographic comparing Linux versus Windows for small business productivity, and Netflix warns Linux users about a new security flaw it's found in some servers. Also, Microsoft warns Azure customers about a security flaw. So these 5 stories we're going to be taking into account. Thanks for the super chat there, Grayson. I used HTML5, CSS3 for comp, TIA, A+, and Network Plus for note-taking. So you did all your note-taking in HTML. Why not use something like Graph or LaTeX? Or just plain text in Vim. Hey, but whatever floats your boat there, Grayson. All right, so the first story on the docket is the Open Invention Network. Again, it's this Linux-based patent non-aggression community, now has crossed the 3,000 member mark. Give me just a second, guys. All right, so the Open Invention Network, we've discussed this a couple of times on the Taking Into Account series. The OIN is basically a group of organizations. They're joining this non-aggression pact, basically, meaning, every company and organization, they have patents, and you don't want to get involved in litigation and trials and all these patent fights amongst one another. So it's basically this agreement that everybody that joins the Open Invention Network, we're not going to get entangled in these patent wars. You're free to use our patents. We're free to use your patents. So really, really cool. The big thing with the OIN recently was the fact that Microsoft joined the OIN. Of course, other companies that you know and love, like Red Hat and IBM and things like that, of course, are involved in the OIN as well. But the fact that a company like Microsoft, which holds so many patents and could be considered at times in its history patent trolls, the fact that they joined the OIN was a really big deal. So one of the things that really bogs companies down is the enormous amount of money spent on lawyers and fighting cases about intellectual property rights. So IP, intellectual property. So anytime we talk about IP in this article, what Stephen J. Vaughn Nichols here in ZDNet is talking about intellectual property. So thanks to the OIN, which is the largest patent non-aggression community in history, Linux and other open source technologies that basically we're free of all these entanglements. We don't have to worry about it because so many of these open source companies are now a member of the OIN. We're not going to be fighting amongst each other, and as more proprietary companies start getting on the open source bandwagon like Microsoft, hopefully they join the OIN. Some of these patent entanglements that these companies tend to get in will become less and less. So the OIN's mission is basically to enable Linux and just free and open source software in general and its programmers to be able to develop and monetize their products without being hogtied by the potential to be involved in these patent fights. So that is the big deal with the OIN. Of course, why this is a story today is they crossed the 3,000 member mark, kind of a big deal. Jim Zemlin of the Linux Foundation, he's quoted here that the Linux Foundation's success has been directly enabled by the patent risk mitigation platform that the OIN has provided. So the reason Linux is successful is the fact that they are not that worried about the risk of, again, this litigation, the patent risk involved around developing the Linux kernel. And let's get back to the chat for a second here. I'm going to keep them kind of short and brief today. We did the Taking Into Account last week also live. I went a little long on some of them, and the stream ran kind of long. This story here, though, was pretty straight and to the point. Mainly, it's the OIN, has 3,000 members. We've discussed what the OIN is many times on the show before. I think it's a great thing, you know, with it. All the big free and open source Linuxy companies, of course, are already members of the OIN. Now that you got companies like Microsoft, hopefully, you know, other, you know, evil, I'll say it in quotes, although Microsoft, you know, is kind of changing my mind these days, but as more and more people are joining the OIN, I think it's great. One of the big things that holds back development is really the patent trolls out there. Some of the biggest ones out there historically, like I said, Microsoft has always been known as one, but Apple especially, big time patent troll. A lot of these companies just collect these patents. They buy these patents from other companies. They just sit on them. And they sit on them just hoping that they can basically sue somebody one day. That's the only reason they hold on to these patents. Matter of fact, for a long time, I don't know if it's expired yet, but Microsoft actually made a substantial amount of its income in the last few years because of patents it held involving the Android operating system. Every single Android device out there, Microsoft made $1 or $2 off, or something. I don't know what the exact amount is. I don't know if anybody knows what the exact amount is. But the fact that there are billions of Android devices out there, Microsoft makes a ton of money off of Android, or at least made a ton of money off of Android. Just because they happen to hold some patents that basically forced, you know, companies like Samsung to agree to give them a cut of all the money they were making off Android. Back to the YouTube chat for a second. I got my coffee this afternoon. I felt like I needed it. I needed a bit of a pickup. Went to the gym this morning, got a little bit of a workout in. Leg day. Leg day is always the worst day. So, felt like I needed a little caffeine. Yeah, Toss. You guys know it's hard to impress me after 13 years Linux use, but Chromebooks impress. It just works. Yeah, I could see that, Toss. I still haven't purchased a Chrome OS device myself, but I'm looking hard at the Pixelbook. It's the one I really want. Yeah, so Alan Pope says, Toss, enjoy your proprietary nonsense. Yeah, Toss. Thanks, Alan. I still love you. Okay. You know, people get mad at me every time I say something like what Alan just says, because sometimes people will bring up things like Chrome or whatever. Proprietary garbage. And then people get mad when you call stuff they use proprietary garbage. Like Microsoft Office, for example. Why are you calling it Microsoft Office proprietary garbage? Because it is. I mean, what do you mean? Well, I have to use it. Okay, well, I didn't call you proprietary garbage. I called the program you're using proprietary garbage. Some of you guys really take this stuff personally, and you really shouldn't. Yeah, Telsaurus. Derek, do you ever drink coffee with cream, heavy cream, or just black? Always black. Occasionally, I'll put some cream in it, but it's rare. Mostly, it's just black coffee. That's all I ever do. I don't do sugar, so typically water is all I do. I don't do sodas, so it's water, or if I want something with some caffeine, black coffee, unsweet tea, iced tea, sometimes hot tea, but typically if I'm going to do a hot drink, coffee. Yeah, Jeff Smith, Temple OS still has vulnerabilities, but please review it. Temple OS, there's not much to look at. I actually did a video a little bit briefly discussing Temple OS a while back, but there's really, like, there's not that much to Temple OS. Like, you can't really do much with it, so. Yeah, Alan Pope, I too love me some proprietary garbage sometimes, mostly games. Oh, well, you have no choice. If you're going to game, you have to use proprietary software. I mean, there's some free and open source games out there, but you're going to run out of games to play pretty quickly if you stick to just free and open source. There's just not that many of them out there. Although I do love a few the free and open source games. Some of my favorites, things like Xonotic for a shooter. If you like real-time strategy, Zero AD is fantastic. If you like turn-based strategy, Battle for Westnoth is great. Of course, Super Tux Kart, you know. All right. Let's get into the next item here. Oh, what am I doing here? I'm just struggling today. All right. And the second story on the docket tonight is, what is the point of Ubuntu in 2020? What should Ubuntu be? And is it on the right path? And why did I pick this thing? It's because it's clickbait. Alan Pope already knew where I was going with this. Actually, it's not even really a news article, but it is a very long discussion over on Reddit, over on r/Linux, and I thought it was interesting, not just to discuss what is the point of Ubuntu, but what is the point of any distribution, really. So, of course, a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that I don't really understand the point of Linux Mint. I've mentioned in the past, actually, it's been a recurring theme on my channel, really since the beginning, that I think there's way too many Ubuntu-based distros and way too many Arch-based distros. Many of them don't differentiate themselves in any way. Many of them are just Ubuntu with a different theme or Arch with a different theme. And, you know, I think some of these distributions don't do a good job marketing themselves. They don't put it out there exactly what is their purpose. What is the point? I don't see that in the case with Ubuntu. So just briefly reading here. Quote, I want to preface this by saying this isn't meant to be anti-Ubuntu or canonical bashing. Of course, my comment a couple of weeks ago about Linux Mint was not trashing Linux Mint, even though, oh, you're a hater. I actually think Linux Mint is a fine distribution. It wasn't anything against the quality of Linux Mint, and I don't think this guy is bashing Ubuntu or questioning the quality of Ubuntu as a distribution. He just says, quote, I'm not 100% sure what this is supposed to be, frankly, but nevertheless, I want to share my thoughts on Ubuntu in a kind of open letter format, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes on to write this novel, basically. But basically, he's been a Linux user for about 15 years. So I've been a long time Linux user too, about 12 years. Started with Ubuntu. I think this guy also started with Ubuntu. And Ubuntu has changed a lot since those early days till now. And I think that's part of what he's getting at is the direction of Ubuntu. It seems like it has changed direction a few times in its history. It's like rivers that change their course. You know, they never stay the same until, of course, man gets involved and starts levying things up and keeps the river in one direction. You know, rivers constantly are changing course. And it seems like Ubuntu, the distribution, has changed its course a few times. There for a while, it seemed very much geared as the new user-friendly distribution. It was the new user-friendly distribution, certainly in the early days. There weren't that many Linux distributions that catered to new users and that were approachable. Back in the very early days of Ubuntu, that was really it. It was just Ubuntu. I mean, there was Mandrake, I think, was still around. That was it for, you know, easy to get into Linux distributions. I mean, Arch was around, Gentoo was around, Slackware was around, Debian was around, Red Hat, SUSE, but none of those were palatable to the new user like Ubuntu was in those early days. And then the polish of the desktop with the old GNOME 2 desktop, the Compiz effects and everything. It was just a really polished, clean, professional look, and it really did differentiate itself from everybody else. Now, fast forward a little bit, and you had, of course, the Unity desktop environment, and that really, I think, differentiated itself from everybody else. Ubuntu was the Unity desktop. It became kind of synonymous with the Unity desktop in a lot of ways, kind of like, in my mind, I kind of equate the Cinnamon desktop with Mint because the Mint devs, of course, also developed the Cinnamon desktop environment. Ubuntu, you know, Canonical developed Ubuntu and the Unity desktop environment. So it was kind of their desktop environment. And if you wanted to run Unity, you really needed to run Ubuntu. You could get Unity to work in Arch, but it wasn't a great experience. I think you could also hack it in such a way maybe to get it to work in Fedora for a time. But really, if you wanted to run Unity, you ran Ubuntu, and that's kind of what I saw Ubuntu as, was the Unity desktop environment, which, in my opinion, was fantastic. I really was a Unity fan. I know that sounds strange because I'm such a fan of minimal window managers. You guys know, love things like OpenBox and Xmonad. Today, of course, I'm an awesome window manager. But Unity, even though it was a little heavier on system resources, kind of was a minimalist kind of desktop. It was keyboard driven. You could do things with just a few keystrokes, launching the launchers. You had your dash. What was the heads up display was fantastic. That I don't think ever got enough attention like it should have. And fast forward a few more years with Ubuntu. Now Ubuntu has, of course, abandoned Unity. Seems like they're focused less on the desktop. We're just going to use GNOME 3. Now, they do tweak GNOME 3 quite a bit, and I like the dash to dock and everything they do in Ubuntu. I think they do GNOME better than pretty much every other GNOME distro, but now it doesn't differentiate itself as much from the competition from back whenever it was using Unity. And as a desktop user, which is where this guy was coming from in his post, again, I'm not going to read the novel here, but what is the point of Ubuntu in 2020? Because now Ubuntu, yeah, it's still the new user-friendly way to get into desktop Linux. But if I go to DistroWatch, and I'm just taking a look at some of the top distros here in DistroWatch, number 1, MX Linux, another very new user-friendly Linux distribution that's easy to get into. Manjaro, Arch-based, but honestly, not terrible for a new user. Mint, of course. Elementary, of course. Ubuntu's also in here. Debian's not for a new user. Solus, again, kind of like Manjaro, even though they're kind of rolling distros, not horrible for a new user. Fedora, I probably wouldn't put on a new user. OpenSUSE, great for a new user. Zorin, great for a new user. Deepin, great for a new user. You see where I'm going with this. Just reading the first 12 or 13 distros here, almost all of them are approachable for the new to Linux user. With notable exceptions were things like Debian, and you could argue maybe Manjaro and Solus wouldn't be great for the new user. Matter of fact, I probably would argue against Manjaro because it's Arch-based, very bleeding edge, even though you can get it installed very quickly and it works. If you're like a NVIDIA user or what you're using, the proprietary video drivers, those updates that you get for your video drivers sometimes may break. You may reboot occasionally and get a black screen. If you're a brand new to Linux user, that's not going to be a great experience for you. If you're old school like me and you've done this a few times, when reboot and get that black screen, my video driver's messed up. I need to reinstall the video driver, So maybe, but anyway, those first 12 or 13 distros I read, 10 of them probably work for a new user, where that wasn't the case in the old days with Ubuntu, where Ubuntu was really one of the only games in town for the new user. Also, it seems like they've changed direction, right? What does Canonical make all its money off of? They don't make their money off of desktop Linux, right? They're all about the server now. They really have pivoted away from the desktop. They're making all their money with the cloud, enterprise, focused on Internet of Things. Of course, they're increasingly focused more on AI, getting into things like that, where the desktop is more of an afterthought. And I could also get into some of the comments of the thread here, but I don't really want to get into the comments. But basically, well, let me read the top one, since it's the top rated comment, whatever that means in Reddit here. Canonical sees Ubuntu Desktop as a developer platform. I'm glad he mentioned that. That was one of the things I was going to mention, is what is the purpose, in my opinion, as far as what I see Ubuntu, the desktop, being good for. If you are a developer, so there's millions, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of Ubuntu servers out there, and you're a developer, yeah, you might want to run Ubuntu on your desktop or laptop to develop on. I mean, that's part of, I think that's a lot of the reasons guys run FreeBSD, for example. BSD is not meant as a desktop operating system, but there's some people that try to make it work. And most of those people that try to make it work, they use BSD servers. And that's why they have BSD on their desktop or laptop, is because they kind of make their money with BSD anyway. They make their living using BSD. So they're using BSD at home because they use BSD at work. And I think I see that as a great use case for something like Ubuntu. Same thing with, like, if you work with Red Hat servers all day, yeah, maybe you should run Fedora or CentOS at home. Or SUSE, same thing. Anyway, I'll just leave that. You guys want to read the thread is very long. Lots of comments. Of course, I linked, I think, to all the discussions today already in the show description. But what do you guys think? Do you guys see Ubuntu as what is the point in 2020? Because it definitely, I think, has changed directions. I mean, it's obvious that it's changed directions, right? It seems like there were 3 major points in its history. There was the old GNOME 2 days, that era where they were going one direction. Then there was the Unity era. And then there's now with the GNOME 3 era. It seemed like there was 3 distinct periods. And it's more than just surface deep, I think. It's more than just a theme that changed. It really seems like directions have changed with Ubuntu as far as the desktop. Yeah, Ubuntu is still striving. It's still thriving even after 2020. Oh, of course, Ubuntu can't die, right? To be honest, no Linux distribution can die. I mean, they can cease to exist, like Antergos, for example. Antergos is no more, but it's all licensed under free and open source licenses. So if you're licensed under a free license, all the work the Antergos guys out there have done, their work is out there. Anybody's free to pick it up. You may have to rename the project, but you can keep going with Antergos. If you wanted to continue that project, again, you may have to rename it, but you're free to take it up, take that mantle and just keep going with these distributions. Same thing happened with the old Crunchbang distribution years ago. It died, and like 3 or 4 different forks popped up like the next week of people that just took all the work the Crunchbang devs were doing and then just kept it going. People often ask me what would happen if Ubuntu died or Canonical, went away or what have you. This is a common question because some people see as Ubuntu as so important that if anything ever happened to it, like Linux would cease to exist. For one thing, again, the code is out there. If you already have the code, it's all GPL'd, it doesn't go away. If Canonical announced tomorrow they were ceasing operation and there was going to be no more development from Ubuntu from them, well, guess what? Plenty of people in the community would take up the project and it would keep going. Matter of fact, it wouldn't even miss a beat. Again, the only thing that might change is branding. Might have to change the name and some stuff. Maybe move to some different servers or whatever, but open source software really potentially could live forever. It's one of the real things that differentiates open source software from proprietary software. Proprietary software has a definite shelf life because proprietary software is made by essentially one entity, the proprietor. If the proprietor dies, the proprietary software dies. It's one of the reasons why I advocate open source software so strongly on this channel. So I think it's one of the things most people, they don't take it into account. That aspect of open source software is the fact that it potentially lives forever. Where your proprietary software, things like we mentioned Microsoft Office and the Adobe Creative Suite, you are completely beholden to Adobe and Microsoft for those products. If they decide one day they no longer want to give you updates for those products, or if it's a web-based service, they want to just shut it down, that's it. Game over. You have absolutely no recourse. Different with open source software. My scenes here in OBS are a little screwy here. Sorry about that, guys. My coffee here. I'm going to try to catch up on the chat a little bit. Might have went a little long-winded on that one. Some of you guys often ask, by the way, it's not just like, what if Ubuntu dies? Some people like, what if the Linux kernel dies? Or some of you guys think the Linux kernel equals Linus Torvalds. What if Linus Torvalds was hit by a bus tomorrow? What would happen to Linux? Would Linux ever be the same? The kernel is so much bigger than just one person. Yes, Linus Torvalds oversees the project, but he goes on vacation all the time. A matter of fact, just a few months ago, didn't he take like a month-long vacation? An entire month. Kernel development still went on, right? They still saw releases. Linux and a lot of the big Linux distributions are so big now, one person really can't just bring them down. Now the community distros. Yeah, the community distros are different, you know, the ones with no corporate backing. So a lot of these distributions have very small development teams, often as small as just one person. Yes, some of those, yeah, one guy gets hit by a bus, they could end. See Void Linux, right? So Void Linux, thankfully, is still going, but Void Linux was on life support there for a while. So was Solus, to be frank. Because the main devs of both Void and Solus, you know, left. The Void dev, he just disappeared off the face of the earth. Nobody knows what happened to him. But therefore, a good year, more than a year, Void didn't see a release, or Solus didn't see a release because they weren't really sure how to proceed without the devs. But again, because it's free and open source software, eventually people, you know, took it upon themselves to continue those projects. So yeah, Assad, love your vids. First time catching a live stream. Thank you, sir. Yeah, Alan Pope. Yeah, Alan Pope, but of course works for Canonical. The Unity era was pretty successful. I would agree, Alan. I thought the Unity era was fantastic. How many laptops do you think Dell sold with GNOME 2? How many with Unity? Yes. Yes, I think Unity was a big selling point for the Dell laptops. I also think System 76, when they were selling, well, they still, of course, sell Ubuntu laptops. Of course, they now have their own distro, Pop! OS, they're also shipping with, but you can still get Ubuntu on it. I mean, that was a big selling point on their kind of sales pages when you went to the System 76. You know, you saw screenshots of Unity and everything, and it just looked gorgeous, right? Had that polished, clean, almost Mac OS kind of look to it. Much better than the Mac OS, though. Mac OS paradigm. But Unity, the workflow in Unity was great. Handled multi-monitors well, too, which is something that not all desktop environments handle well. Yeah, tells us Ubuntu can't die. Microsoft buys Canonical tomorrow. I could see Microsoft eventually buying some Linux distribution. Of course, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, could Microsoft buy Canonical? Yes, of course they could. Microsoft has enough money. They could buy anybody. Microsoft, I think, recently crossed the $1 trillion mark. So we now have Apple, that's a $1 trillion company, and Microsoft. It's a $1 trillion company now, I think. If they're not, I know they were really, really close. So yeah, Microsoft's got enough money. They could buy all the Linux companies they wanted. They could. I'm not sure if what they would do if, like, why would they buy Canonical? Obviously, right now Microsoft seems focused on Azure. I don't think Microsoft would buy a company like Canonical because of desktop Linux, right? It'd all be about the server anyway. Yeah, Breadmoth, I would still be using Slackware. Slackware is a fine distribution. Yeah, so if Ubuntu stopped or was forked off under Mint, I would celebrate. I wouldn't shed a tear. You would celebrate the distribution going away? Well, that's interesting. I mentioned earlier, some of you guys really shouldn't take these things as personal as you do, but there's something going on. Did Mark Shuttleworth spit on your dog? Mark, what did he do? Did he? I think he must have pissed in his Cheerios or something. That's kind of harsh. Yeah, Alan Pope. Yeah, I don't think you appreciate how many people work on Ubuntu. Yeah, there's a lot of Ubuntu users. Like when you get out and you see Linux in the wild, people actually running Linux on their desktops and on their laptops. See a lot of Ubuntu. A lot of Ubuntu. It's one of the reasons why I have a problem sometimes. You guys know I criticize the DistroWatch page hit rankings all the time because they don't really mean anything. Like some of the things that rank kind of high in DistroWatch, I've never seen anybody run. I mean, PC Linux OS is number 20th in the DistroWatch page hit rankings right now. I've never met anybody in real life that ran PC Linux OS. Is it really the 20th most popular Linux distribution on the planet? I seriously doubt it. And that's no knock. It's not nothing personal against PC Linux OS. I like PC Linux OS as a distribution. It shouldn't be ranked 20th in DistroWatch. It's more of a problem with DistroWatch's rankings than PC Linux OS. Alright guys, let's get into the next story, which is Lenovo is shipping Ubuntu on its 2019 ThinkPad P series computers. And the reason I butted this story up against the previous one, what's the point of Ubuntu in 2020? Well, here's one of the answers to what is the point of Ubuntu in 2020 is there are companies shipping laptops pre-installed with Ubuntu. We already talked about two that have been doing it forever, Dell and System 76. Lenovo is shipping ThinkPads with Ubuntu. Total OS today, are you still in the chat? I know he loves ThinkPads. Toss, you need to get one of these new ThinkPads pre-installed with Ubuntu. So I won't read the news article since I went kind of long on the first two stories, but Lenovo, they have this new series, this new line of models. I keep messing this up here, guys. Give me just a second. Give me just a second to fix things here. All right, I think that fixed it on a more permanent basis. Hopefully that won't happen again. So it's possible to purchase Lenovo's new high-performance ThinkPad systems with Ubuntu shipped from the factory starting with the 2019 models. And when they say high-performance, these are not cheap machines. Unfortunately, that seems to be the common theme with companies that offer Ubuntu or any Linux pre-installed on machines is typically they're expensive machines, right? They're high-end machines. And we don't get those $400 laptops you see all over the place at Best Buy and everywhere. We don't get those. We get $1,200 laptops, unfortunately, pre-installed with Ubuntu. Seems like they cater to higher end, but they, of course, cater to developers that want better machines. But if I go to the Lenovo website, let's get off the article and just go to the Lenovo website where they announced the P-Series mobile workstations. Let's see if I compare some of their laptops. Well, you see some of the pricing. So the P1 starts at $1,489. P52, $1,329. Here's one that just comes in barely under $1,000. Wow, and then $1,509. And then these two models are coming soon. Let's click on one of them. So this is the ThinkPad P53S, which is a 15-inch mobile workstation. See what kind of specs. So obviously we're going to have, of course, Intel Core i5. For a $1,500 laptop, I would hope for a better processor than that. Or you do have the option of i7, I guess, for an upgrade. Operating system. Now, here's the interesting thing. Windows 10 Home, Windows 10 Pro, which is actually what Lenovo recommends you get on their machines, but Ubuntu Linux preloaded or Red Hat Linux certified. So, they're fine with putting Ubuntu or Red Hat on this machine if you so choose. Graphics, they're using a Quadro P520, 2 gigs of GDDR5, the 15.6-inch 4K display, very nice. Up to 48 gigs of RAM, but I'm not sure what the base model would ship with. I'm assuming 8 or 16. Storage, 2 terabyte SSD. Anyway, this isn't even out yet. This is coming soon, this particular model. But I just wanted to show you the tech specs that these machines, Windows 10 is offered, Windows 10 Pro is what they recommend, but if you prefer Ubuntu or Red Hat, you can get that on the ThinkPad P-Series, and it will be shipped from the factory, already installed. Very cool. All right. Close some things out here. Back to the chat for a second. Yeah, Eric says, I tried Ubuntu, wasn't stable on my hardware, not sure why. You get that. I'm not Ubuntu, but depending on your hardware and what distribution you try, sometimes you get distributions that just don't work on your particular setup. Just try a different one, right? We've all had those issues where you install something and something's just boogered up and you don't know why. Download a different ISO of something else and try it. Yeah, so Alan Pope, of course, he loves his ThinkPads too. The T420 is also a nice machine, but then I say that about all ThinkPads. Last I heard, didn't you have like 7 or 8 ThinkPads? I think you've got like a stack of them. I think he's got like this laptop rack, like a server rack, and it's nothing but ThinkPads. I don't blame you though. ThinkPads are a nice machine. I wish those ThinkPads didn't have that stupid trackpad in the keyboard. Just annoying. You don't like the trackpad? Okay. I don't mind them myself. Yeah, speaking of Ubuntu, Mate, rock solid OS. Yeah, Ubuntu Mate is a solid distribution. Actually, of the main flavors of Ubuntu, that laptop behind me that you see, C-Matrix, currently running on, that's Ubuntu Budgie 1904, which has been great. I wanted to put it on real hardware and run it for a couple of months on something, so I put it on my ThinkPad. Matter of fact, I'm a patron, actually, of the Ubuntu Budgie guys. Really love what they've been doing the last few releases with Ubuntu Budgie. All right. Yeah, can't have too many ThinkPads. That's true. You really can't have too many computers, right? Because things happen. Things break. It's nice to have a backup machine. Yeah, Alan says he'd happily have a ThinkPad without the trackpad. I'd love one with only the track point, the nipple, yeah. I don't really use the nipple. I'm going to get demonetized, Alan. Why did you have to bring this up? Yeah, switch the trackpad off and only use the nipple. Yeah. And sometimes you got to get a little nipple action in. All right, I better move on before Google or YouTube takes down the stream here. All right, the next story will be a brief one. It's an infographic comparing Linux versus Windows for small business productivity. And I will warn you that this is just a blog post with an infographic some guy made, but it is kind of neat. So comparing Linux versus Windows, of course, when he's saying Linux versus Windows, we have to figure out what Linux and what Windows are we comparing here. He's comparing Linux Mint, of course you see the Linux Mint logo, to Windows 10 1903. And he's doing this on a dual boot HP 245 G6 laptop. And not a terribly scientific, kind of benchmark or anything, but the point is just one man, just his hardware, he's booting them both off the same hardware. Boot time, 1 minute 17 seconds for Linux Mint. Boot time for Windows 10, 2 minutes 37 seconds. Twice as long to boot up Windows 10. Not shocking. I think we all know it takes longer to boot Windows than pretty much any version of Linux. It doesn't matter the init system either. I know some people are going to bring up things like Runit and Void and OpenRC and Gentoo. Systemd boots up very fast too, which is what Linux Mint uses. Opening Slack. So opening the program Slack. Linux Mint takes 50 seconds. Wow. Windows 10, 44 seconds. Okay. That's interesting. Browsing the web with Firefox. Now, this is much more, this is a metric I think that appeals to many of us, is how fast do our web browsers launch? Well, for Firefox, 15 seconds, Linux Mint, 32 seconds in Windows 10 on this particular laptop he's testing this on. That is incredible. Half a minute just to get Firefox open on Windows 10. Loading a particular website, he's loading the linkedin.com/feed, their XML feed. 9 seconds in Mint, 20 seconds in Windows 10. Editing documents with LibreOffice, well, you can see, 14 seconds versus 24 seconds in Windows, 3 seconds versus 6 seconds in Windows, 1 second in Linux Mint, 5 seconds in Windows, and this was with LibreOffice Writer, opening just the program, opening a Word document, and then opening a Word PDF. Editing graphics in GIMP. 9 seconds for launching the program in Mint. 9 seconds to open the program. 43 seconds to open GIMP in Windows. Exporting a high-resolution JPEG. 6 seconds in Mint. 6 seconds in Windows. Now, again, this is not any kind of very scientific benchmarking, and he really doesn't go into much detail as far as what he's doing here. It's just a couple of paragraphs long, but I will say this. Is this a fair test? Well, I mean, he did both operating systems, dual booting, Mint and Windows, on the exact same hardware. That's good, but is it fair to compare? Like, for example, you couldn't take Microsoft Office and benchmark how it performs on Linux Mint and then benchmark how it performs on Windows, because one of them has a native client, one of them doesn't. Yeah, you could run it in Wine or whatever. Maybe down the road, you might even have options to do things like Proton for things like that. But it wouldn't be a fair test. And some of this is running LibreOffice in Linux and running LibreOffice in Windows a fair test, because it's free and open source software. The same with GIMP. Free and open source software. Yes, they make a Windows client, but they really develop these programs with Linux in mind. Yes, they just happen to have a Windows version, but it's not a first-class citizen the way GIMP is a first-class citizen on Linux. So I'm not saying, the test that he did is completely unfair, but you do have to keep that in mind. But the point is, Linux over Windows, but I'm preaching to the choir on that. Back to the YouTube chat for a second. Yeah, the Pinnacle of Windows. What was the Pinnacle of Windows? You talking about Windows 10 1903? I thought the best Windows ever was Windows 3.1, Windows for workgroups. Everything was downhill after that. Actually, Windows 95 wasn't horrible. But starting with 98, you saw a real decline in the quality of Windows. Certainly by the XP days, wow. XP was just so wide open as far as security. Yeah, Romy is asking, Derek, what do you think about disabling the API web request in Google Chrome by default to prevent cleaning ads on web pages? I don't like it. I haven't read too much about it. I heard they were doing that. For one thing, I don't use Google Chrome because it's proprietary garbage. Yes, I use that term. Again, when you use proprietary software, you're really at the mercy of the proprietor, right? They run the show. If it was free and open source software, you might have some options here. You might have some recourse, but if you're going to run Chrome, I mean, that's what you're going to get. So, and I'm not criticizing you guys that use Chrome, but you have to accept the consequences for using proprietary software. I mean, you know the difference between free software and proprietary software. So when you use proprietary software and it does these proprietary sorts of things, you signed up for that when you decided to use that. So yeah, it was all downhill for Microsoft after DOS 5. Team blue screen. Yeah, they still do the blue screen. I got one of the blue screens the other day. You know, Windows 10 has the nice little blue screen now with the frowny face. And then there's still Windows machines, they're so bad at giving you error messages too. Like sometimes the error messages don't even make sense. Like you get the blue screen of death and error, code 0. And then, like, what does that even mean? Like, it doesn't even give you an explanation of... I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if it's actually code 0, but it'll just give you some random thing. But it doesn't really explain what that is. It's one of the things I love about Linux, especially when you're in the terminal. You get an error, it tells you exactly what the problem is. Sometimes it'll even tell you how to fix it. Sometimes it'll even give you the exact command to type in the terminal to fix it. It's the beauty of the terminal. Another common question I get, why do you use the terminal all the time? Well, for some things, it makes things easier. Yeah, why wouldn't Microsoft just release all the source code to MS-DOS? Well, yeah, you would think because it's so old, nobody really does much with DOS anymore. Why not just open source it just on good faith, right? Hey, open source community, you know, we say we love open source. Here we are proving it. Here's MS-DOS. Instead, what did we get? The Windows calculator. Yes, that's what we really needed. Another open source calculator. Thank you, Microsoft. Yeah, got a pink screen recently. A pink screen of death? I didn't know they had one. King Zero. Your blue screen, now more useful. Microsoft opened their source code, you'd see that the error codes are just randomly generated nonsense for their tech support department to feel official. DT, check my message, my above message if you want to laugh. If that's very far above, I may not be able to find it. Yeah. In this mass of chat, I may not be able to catch up with it, Farron. Yeah, Derek. Terminal PSA. You know, I should do one of my public service announcement kind of videos like I did, you know, about why I use free and open source software. I did another PSA kind of video a while back on why you should choose Linux over Mac. I should do one of those public, short little 4 or 5 minute public service announcement type videos about the terminal. Why you should choose the terminal. Because especially newer to Linux users often ask me that. And there's many reasons why opening a terminal and doing things in a terminal is a good idea in some circumstances. Right now we're talking about error messages. For example, I'm streaming right now. I'm using OBS to do this live stream. What if, before I started this stream, I tried to launch OBS and it didn't launch? How would I know what the problem is? Well, I wouldn't just launching OBS in a normal sort of way, but let me open up a terminal, launch OBS, run OBS in the terminal. That way, if there's some sort of failure, a seg fault or something, I actually get some output in the terminal. It kind of gives me a clue what might be the problem. Yeah, so Farron is going to repost his content. Thank you. So I just found out that in Ubuntu, if you remove apt and try to run apt, you'll get the program apt is not install. You can install it by running apt install apt. Well, yes. Why would you uninstall your package manager in any distribution? That's a bad idea. Yeah, you really shouldn't uninstall your default package manager on your distribution. And I'll go a step further because you Arch guys especially, because I hear from some of you guys doing weird things like installing package managers other than Pacman in Arch and then trying to use them. I know you can install apt, A-P-T, the Debian/Ubuntu package manager in Arch. Don't do it. It's not supported. It's experimental and it will hose your system. Yeah, I know you can also install Void Linux's package manager. What is it? XBPS or whatever it is. Again, don't do it. Pacman is the Arch package manager. End of story. And if you choose to do something like that, know you're going to break your system, and then don't complain about it when it breaks. Don't send me a message, oh, I just hosed my machine because I ran a sudo apt update in Arch. I'm not even going to respond to those kinds of messages. Install the apt snap. Yeah, that would solve the problem. Maybe we can ask Popey to make a snap pack for apt. Then you could use apt on any distro. Don't do it, guys. Don't do it. Yeah, that's like installing a DOS program in Arch. Right. All right, let's get to the final story here. All right, the next story is really two separate stories, but of a similar theme. I just wanted to throw this out there. For those of you, of course, some of you, of course, run Linux servers. There's new security flaws every week in the Linux world. That's just to be expected. But Netflix is warning Linux users, all Linux users. It has nothing to do with using Netflix as a service. But Netflix runs Linux servers, of course, the back end. The web runs Linux. And Netflix, those guys have discovered a flaw in Linux, and they're warning you about it. Also, Microsoft is warning its Azure customers about a flaw that they found. So, the flaw that the next Netflix guys found is something called the SAC panic. And basically, you need to patch your machines, your servers, for this SAC panic kernel bug now to stop a remote attack. What exactly is this remote attack? Well, if you're running Linux or FreeBSD servers as well, it is basically a denial of service attack. Basically, it takes down the server. Why is this a big deal? Well, Netflix, of course, all their videos or whatever are hosted on Linux servers. They're actually probably hosted on Amazon servers, the AWS. And it's a big deal if somebody could get into these servers and just take them down, take them offline. So Netflix found this bug, and several other companies have also reported this bug. Red Hat lists this bug as an important bug as far as the severity. They list it as important. Netflix, though, they are listing it as critical. Netflix is really wanting this thing patched very quickly. Again, I guess they're worried because all their servers are Linux servers. The back end of Netflix is nothing but Amazon Web Services, AWS infrastructure. The Microsoft one here is a little less severe, at least for the masses. Microsoft warns Azure customers about this Exum worm. Basically, it's for any of you guys running Exum servers, email servers, basically. Somebody is exploiting these machines, and it spreads throughout your network. And what are they doing to these machines? This is not a denial of service attack. No, they are installing cryptocurrency miners on these servers. Yet another story. It seems like half these stories about these Linux security bugs are people trying to put cryptocurrency miners on machines, in this case servers. But also we've had this problem with Linux on the desktop too. A while back we had the snap pack that somebody was spreading around that was installing cryptocurrency miner on your machines. So fire up HTOP, guys. See if you got any weird processes going on. If you got something running and you don't recognize the name, you might want to check it out. Of course, you should patch your systems. That's always the point of these, is update. Update the kernel. It's a bigger deal on servers because, you're typically not running rolling release distributions on a server. Some people can go months, sometimes years, without updating a server. That's not a good idea for security reasons, obviously. Back to the chat for a second. The SAC panic, yeah. And SAC, by the way, what does SAC stand for? I should remember this, but I don't. SAC stands for Selective Acknowledgement. It's part of the Linux kernel's TCP, Selective Acknowledgement. TCP, so it's a networking issue here. Yeah, highly recommend running something like Sophos Antivirus RK Hunter alongside your Linux and have something like UFW Firewall. Yeah, UFW, the uncomplicated firewall. I'm not sure if antivirus would detect these, though. I'm not sure on that, Mark. Certainly nothing wrong with running antivirus, though. Certainly can't hurt. Yeah, Romy makes a great point here. Derek, one last thing. I've been noticing that lots of people trust any open source program. They don't check it, just install it if it's a program not in the distro's repos. That's a vital topic to discuss. So, if you install a package that's not in your distribution's core repos, so if you install a PPA in Ubuntu, or if you install something from the AUR in Arch, or an overlay in Gentoo, or you go out to GitHub and find somebody's Bash script or Python script, and it's something you're looking for, don't just run it, right? You might want to actually read the source code and make sure it's not doing anything obvious, that would be harmful to your machine. I know some folks complain about that when you tell them, read the source code. Well, how would I'm not a dev. How would I know what any of that means? You may not. And if you don't, so be it. But you also have to understand that you're responsible for every piece of software that gets installed and then executed on your machine. So if you just go get somebody's random script from GitHub and run it, and it does something really nasty to your machine, you just need to know that that's your fault. And I mean that in the nicest sort of way. I mean, ultimately, it's your own fault what happens to your machine. Also, have good backups. That's probably the best piece of advice. Just have good backups. If you have backups, then a lot of this won't matter. If you happen to come across something that just completely hoses your machine, well, at least I got good backups. I'm not out much. If you don't have good backups, then it, could be devastating. I missed some of the chat here. Let me back up a little bit. Big Pod, DT, those numbers seem so wrong. I'm not sure which numbers you were referring to, Big Pod. Sorry about that. You might have been catching some of the earlier stream. I don't think I mentioned any numbers here in the last story about the security flaws. Might have been the infographic is probably what you were still discussing there. But yeah, the infographic, it's not, if that's what you were talking about, I even mentioned it. It's not like a scientific sort of thing. It's just one guy, he was dual booting Mint and Windows, and he was benchmarking a few things, running on both. And I even mentioned it, if you might have gotten to the end of the story where I mentioned it's not really a fair comparison. Obviously, most open source software is going to run much better on Linux because that's what it was really developed for than how it runs on Windows 10. I get that, right? Even though I'm a Linux fanboy and I'm not a fan of Windows at all, even I will admit wasn't the best test. Certainly wasn't fair. Dumb question, probably, but are LTS distros like Ubuntu in danger with that kind of bug? You're not supposed to change the kernel in the Ubuntu, Red Hat, those big distros, even though they're not rolling release distros and they don't really update the kernel as far as you're not going to get like that next newest kernel version like you do in the rolling release distros, they do patch the kernel for security flaws. I don't know if Alan Pope is still in the chat, but I'm sure he could discuss that in a better way, exactly how Ubuntu decides to patch their kernels. But I know like the major security flaws of these kernel flaws, usually Canonical is one of the first ones to push out a patch. Same with Red Hat, because they make all their money, right? They make millions and billions in Red Hat's case on Linux servers. They can't have these machines go unpatched. They patch these things really quick. Sometimes within hours. Sometimes the patch is already out there before the news articles are printed about it. Yeah, Big Pod. DT, I don't run any AV on Windows or Linux. Yeah, we have discussed this before, Big Pod. Big Pod does not do antivirus, and I think Big Pod also doesn't do firewall. Yep. You're a brave man, though, doing that on Windows, Big Pod. Yeah, never had any malware since using Linux for 7 years now. Yeah, I've never found a virus or any kind of malware or anything on any of my Linux installations. But trust me, it's out there. You're not likely to find it. Like if you're the typical desktop user, you get all your software from the repositories and you're not going out of your way to go get third-party stuff, from potentially scandalous places. You're probably okay. Yeah, if it's not scientific, it's useless. Now, you're talking about the infographic. I thought it was still an interesting take on it. I mean, I expect his results, although maybe not 100% accurate. I mean, I think we all know Linux boots faster than Windows. I don't think that's a shock. Some of this, though, like opening the web browser, I think that was a fair test. The Firefox web browser, LibreOffice, maybe not. Certainly GIMP. I mean, the GIMP guys, they're developing GIMP for Linux, right? I know they make a Windows client, but it's not like they're really developing GIMP for Windows users. So the fact that GIMP outperforms on Linux is not a shock at all. Yeah, so Alan Pope is clarifying the kernel. We have a kernel team, and we often cherry pick patches from newer kernels, and then they backport them to the older kernels that they ship with. Okay, very cool. Also, canonical live patch is a thing. Big Pod, he does use a firewall. He uses a hardware firewall, though. So I'm assuming you've got a firewall on your router. Yeah, I'm not such a brave man. If you are not an idiot, if you're not an idiot, you will not get viruses. Yeah, so STS Tech 6 showed up in Peppermint OS. I think it's time to toss that tool. DT, do you check the source code when you download from GitHub? It depends on what it is. If it's somebody's bash script, yeah, typically I'll read that thing. Because typically they're not very long and it's pretty obvious. Like if you see something in the bash script that is, removing directories recursively or something, you might want to check what it's doing. If it's removing your home folder or your root directory recursively, I might not run that bash script. More substantial projects that happen to host their code on GitHub, there's some things on GitHub obviously that are very trustworthy. They're legit software by big projects. And I worry less about those than just some random guy's bash script or Python script. Yeah, you might want to open it and see what that script actually does before executing it. DT, how do you make the directory part on the terminal colorful? How do you make the directory part on the terminal colorful? I'm not exactly sure. Are you talking about the prompt? Yeah, I'm not set up for this actually today on OBS, but let me pull up a terminal. So if I just open a terminal here, I'm in floating mode. You're talking about maybe my power line effect here. So I use ZSH, what I'm using right now, the Z shell, ZSH. And this theme here, this prompt theme, is called Power Level 10K. Power Level 10K. Here, I'll type it. And you can find this on GitHub. We were just talking about finding stuff on GitHub. Let's see. I'll zoom in so you can read it. I'll zoom in a million times. All right. Power Level 10K, I believe, is the name of the ZSH theme I use. I hope that's what you meant. All right. I'm going to close out all my browsers here. All right. I'll probably kill the stream here in a few minutes, but I'll chat with you guys for a little bit. I still got a couple of more sips of coffee here. And Big Pod, only time I got a virus was when I brought a laptop that had viruses on it, and I reinstalled Windows and I forgot to format the SD card, which had the viruses on that SD. Doesn't exist anymore. Okay. Yeah, Alan, I need to pop out and get my daughter from dancing. See you later, DT. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate you. Yeah, Linux has been winning the bug virus war. Well, yes. Obviously, in the early days of Windows, Windows had some real problems, especially with privileges, with root privileges. Just anything could execute on the machine and cause problems. Now Windows is locked down quite a bit more. Just a second, guys. Of course, now that we have got through the show here, yeah. So the last 2 or 3 weeks, started a new job using a lot of Microsoft software and Big Pod. I really love Microsoft Office 365. I love OneDrive. I really love Outlook. It's changed my life, Big Pod. Of course, I'm joking. All fine products. I know Big Pod loves his Microsoft products. Well, thanks for the super chat there, Rudy. Appreciate you. Yeah, so the last 2 or 3 weeks haven't produced as much content as I normally do. Again, because of work and some of the things transitioning into the new job. But we're going to get back on track. Probably starting this weekend, you'll see a little more content. Certainly next week, I'll try to get back into a normal routine. I didn't mind slacking back a little bit from my typical output. I needed a little bit of a break. Bit of a vacation from the channel. But I've got some things planned next week, so I've got some content that I think you guys will find interesting. Yep, Big Pod. People hate to give the administrative privilege prompt. Yeah, people don't like when you get the prompt in Windows for escalated privileges. Some people just refuse to give it. Well, if you don't give it, you can't really install anything, so. So, you write all your email in Vim, as I recall. Yes, well, not all my email. So, on my Linux machine, here at home, yes, I have NeoMut installed. I'm not going to open it because I don't know what emails are in it today. So I thought about opening NeoMut, but I won't because it's my real email account. Might be some sensitive information in there. But anyway, yes, NeoMut, you have the option in the NeoMut config to set whatever plain text editor you want, I guess, to write your email in Vim. Makes sense. Sure, you could do Nano if you prefer Nano, though. Now, I also have Geary installed on the system for a GUI email client. Which is really nice when dealing with HTML emails, and I already mentioned now at my job, Outlook is the email client on our network there. I also have the Outlook Android app on my phone synced to my work email. So I'm an Outlook user now. I never thought I would say it. But now I understand, all you guys that used to tell me you have to use this proprietary garbage because of work. I said, no, you don't. Yeah. I'm one of those people now. Noct says, I hear Manjaro keeps breaking. Is that true? I need a stable distro that I won't have to reinstall every 2 weeks or so. Well, as far as major breakages, like having to reinstall, I've never had an issue running Manjaro. As far as minor breakage, yeah, it's a rolling release. You're going to have these little paper cuts occasionally. Probably the biggest one as far as a common occurrence on a rolling release. I discussed it early in the show, talking about why Manjaro might not be the best for brand new Linux users or any rolling release. Is say your video driver updates. You reboot the machine and you get the black screen. That's all you get, black screen. You know, if you're a new Linux user, you may not know what that solid black screen means. Well, if you've been around a while, you know it's probably a problem with your video driver. You just need to drop to a TTY prompt and maybe install the previous video driver that was working for you. A new user wouldn't understand that. They'd have no idea what the problem was. They just see a black screen. They assume their system is completely hosed and they install a new distro or the same distro or whatever. Somebody that's been around for a little while knows what the problem is. It's like a 2-minute fix. But this is the kind of problem you have to deal with in a rolling release that you will never have to deal with on a static release distro, because you're never going to get that latest NVIDIA driver and that latest kernel and things like that. You know, they stay on those same kernels and drivers, you know, on static release distros. And the reason they do that is for stability. They know that if you update every single kernel, eventually you might get the dreaded kernel panic. And they definitely know not to update your video drivers, because video drivers will break on you. Rolling releases, though, everything on the system updates. You know, kernel, a knit system, your desktop environment. As soon as there's a new version of it, it's coming out. Arch is not holding anything back. Same thing with Manjaro, although technically Manjaro holds it back 2 weeks from Arch, but 2 weeks is not that long. The things that break in Arch also are going to break in Manjaro. They just break 2 weeks later. Yeah, I can't remember how to drop back to try prompt, to the TTY prompt. Okay. On your keyboard, Control Alt, and then F2, F3, F4, F5, F6. I think F7 actually gets you back into the graphical environment when you're done with whatever TTY you're in. Yeah, sudo apt-get auto remove apt-get. Yeah, don't auto remove apt-get if you're on a Debian or Ubuntu based distribution. Bad idea, guys. rm-rf root. Don't rm-rf any directory unless you know what you're doing, and never rm-rf root or home. As a matter of fact, yeah, don't even type rm-rf ever in the terminal. So many people make mistakes with rm-rf. So many guys have accidentally deleted the root directory or the home directory, and then they lose all their data, and they didn't have good backups. Like, literally, the last thing you should ever type in a terminal is rm --rf, because that next argument you give it, if you fat finger it in any way, right? So you should never type rm-rf in the terminal, unless you have a very good reason to be doing so. And Manny is giving us, of course, the bash command there. That little random string of characters is actually the fork bomb. That is the bash fork bomb. That will crash your machine if you run that at a prompt. It's not a good idea to do that. Though it shouldn't do any permanent damage to your machine, it's still probably not a good idea to run that command. Yeah, Michael says, DT, I got played years ago when I was new. I don't run that joke. Yeah. Well, the good thing is a lot of the bigger distributions, they actually disable rm-rf root and rm-rf home, because it'll give you a warning message. Like in Ubuntu, for example, if you typed it and hit enter in the terminal, don't do it, just in case. I could be wrong on the latest versions of Ubuntu, but they give you a message saying basically you shouldn't run that command. If you really want to run that command, type this longer string of stuff and then it'll execute it. But a lot of people mess up with rm-rf, so it's not a command you should really run. Also dd. Those of you that like formatting your USB sticks with dd, be careful with dd. Before you hit enter running the dd command, make sure that is the actual disk and that is the actual partition that you're actually meaning to format. Again, it's one character off and you could format the wrong drive. And if you don't have a backup, once again, you're hurting. So, yeah, Willie says, oh man, I'm tempted to try. Yeah, the rm-rf and Ubuntu. Yeah, if you do that on root, it should give you a message basically asking, do you really want to do that? And then you have to type in a longer command. And if you type in that longer command and hit enter, then it'll really remove root. Yeah, why are people talking about running rm-rf? That is just stupid. I agree. I agree there, Penguin. It's not something I would be typing in the chat for fear of noobs actually running that command. As far as why am I talking about it, there are reasons to run rm-rf, which is basically remove a directory recursively. But recursively removing a directory, again, is dangerous. That's why I'm talking about it. You really shouldn't be running that command. More dangerous shell commands. You guys got jokes today. Yeah, Penguin says, yeah, Ubuntu has safeties built into the rm-rf, running it as root. Yep. But what if you need to delete a bunch of files? Well, here's one thing I would say about doing something dangerous like deleting a directory with a bunch of files. And if you're worried about doing the rm-rf, you probably have a graphical file manager on your system, like me. Even though I typically do basic file management just in a prompt, I do have PCManFM installed on this system. If I'm really worried about mistyping something doing a rm-rf, I don't mind pulling up the graphical file manager and then deleting a directory through it. Because deleting a directory through it, of course, also sends it to the trash can. Like if I really messed up, well, it's sitting in the trash can, so I can get it back. Deleting it at the command prompt, there's no trash can involved. Once it's gone, it's gone. I appreciate the super chat there, Lex. Have you ever used Proxmox? I have not. People have asked me about it. It's just not something I've ever used. Yeah, so somebody was asking about the window manager I'm using. I'm using Awesome Window Manager, but I was thinking probably in the next week I'm going to go ahead and hop to the next tiling window manager I wanted to try, which will probably be the last one that I hop to. I'm going to hop to a BSPWM and try that out. And then I think my tiling window manager hopping will be over, because I will have tried about 7 or 8 different ones. So I'll probably live in BSPWM for a month and then call it quits on the window manager hopping. After that, I'm going to go back to whatever it is I want to run, which will probably be either Qtile or Xmonad. Maybe DWM. Those three I really enjoyed my time in. Yeah, Big Paw says, I personally more trust myself with the GUI editor when deleting files. Yes. I would agree with that, Big Pod. I don't mind doing it in even the terminal-based file managers like VIFM, but just typing a command at a prompt. Again, just if you fat finger something, you could run the wrong command, and there's no way to get it back. Right? Once it's gone, it's gone. Yeah, DT, are you still on Arco? I'm still on Arco Linux on my main production machine. The laptops I recently hopped on The ThinkPad behind me that's running C Matrix right now is running Ubuntu Budgie 1904. The Toshiba Satellite laptop that I also have, sometimes you guys see me running that. The Toshiba Satellite, I put a Manjaro's i3 edition on it. The latest ISO for Manjaro i3. Yeah, backups, the only way to make sure you can't fail. Absolutely. Yeah. So, after that, are you going back to i3? i3 was probably the least favorite tiling window manager I tried. I doubt, like, just, you know, if I want to go to a window manager that I enjoy and I just want to stick with long-term, i3 probably be one of the last ones I would go to be honest. Let's see. Hoystein says, okay, Qtile does look nice. Yeah, Qtile can be very attractive and very configurable. More than just the looks, I like just how it functions. It's very configurable. The panel is very configurable, has a ton of widgets, has a ton of pre-built layouts. You don't have to use them all, but there must be about 30 different layouts that you could use in Qtile if you wanted to use them. You'd have to read the documentation, but also I like how it handles multi-monitors, because Qtile handles multi-monitors the way Xmonad does, which is the way I prefer, where all your workspaces are shared amongst all your monitors, rather than having workspaces on each monitor. I don't like that. Yeah, and Farid, why do you like OpenBox? Does it allow Windows tiling? No, OpenBox is a floating window manager. It's not really for tiling. You can kind of do some tiling with it, but it's not really tiling in the sense of a tiling window manager. But you can set hotkeys where windows can be forced into different areas on the screen, but that's not really a true tiling window manager. OpenBox is really a floating window manager. As far as why do I like it, OpenBox is one of the lightest, fastest window managers out there. That's why a lot of people use it. It's great on servers, by the way. Those of you that want to install a graphical environment on a server for whatever reason, OpenBox is a great option because it has no dependencies. Other than X, obviously you have to have the display server, but OpenBox has no dependencies. It can boot up in, 200 megs of RAM. It's just great. As far as lightweight, but it's powerful too. I really like the right-click menu, the fact that you can do those pipe menus with it, where you can write your own bash script or Python script and have it output into the right-click menu of OpenBox. That is a really powerful feature. I wish more window managers had something like that. Yeah, PCT. Have a good night, DT, and the chat. Yeah, I'll be shutting down here in just another minute or two. Thanks for stopping by. Romy, Derek, you wrote a comment to Chris's video. I think I'm subscribed to about 100 Linux-related channels, including all the... So, will you shoot a similar video review? I have done it in the past, a video about some Linux YouTube channels that I'm subscribed to, but the last time I did a video like that was early on in the channel's history, nearly 2 years ago. So it would need to be updated. I might do a video about that sometime in the near future, because, again, Linux YouTube channels come and go. Some of the ones I was watching then are probably dead, and of course a lot of new channels have sprung up in the last couple years. But I tell you what I will do. It's me. If you're interested in exactly what I'm subscribed to, why don't I just go, if you go to the DistroTube YouTube channel, go to the Channels tab, and you will see every single Linux channel I'm subscribed to. They're all here. Okay, so Marcus Brownlee and Episvox are not YouTube or not Linux channels, but I mean they're tech channels. But see what else? I think Linus Tech Tips is in here. Just ignore Linus Tech Tips as well. Occasionally, I've been enjoying Linus Tech Tips Linux videos here lately. The last few Linux-related videos of his haven't been horrible. There is some of what I am subscribed to. But yeah, I probably should do a video at some point in the future about some of the channels out there. Actually, one of the things I would want to do is I would like to actually focus on some of the small Linux channels out there. Because occasionally I come across, some Linux YouTube channels out there that are just getting started. Nobody really knows about them. And sometimes I'm shocked at the quality of the content. I think there's a lot of folks out there that deserve a lot more views than they get. Obviously, being a bigger channel, I could help those guys out by spreading the word about those channels. So if I did a video about some of the Linux YouTube channels I watch, I probably would focus on some of the smaller ones, to be honest. You guys, I mean, I don't need to tell you guys about Luke Smith and Brian Lunduke or Jupiter Broadcasting, things like that. You guys know about those. Yeah, I'd focus on some of the guys that are just getting started. Yeah, STS Tech, since Linus is getting so much better. Yeah, Linus Tech Tips has gotten better with his Linux coverage. I think when he did the gaming one that everybody just trashed him on, I think he took that criticism as constructive criticism, and I think he took it to heart, and he is definitely trying a lot more with the Linux coverage now. So I got to give him credit for that. Absolutely. Yeah, Big Pod, small as crap. Okay, also like crap. YouTube channel. And Big Pod is talking about his channel. We got to get you making more videos, Big Pod. Also, STS Tech is also here. You got to make more videos as well, Mark. I know it's tough. Yeah. This is time consuming. Even live streaming even is time consuming, but especially pre-recorded videos, editing video, a lot of work involved. It's really hard to do this consistently. I've kind of stuck to it for a year and a half or so. Not quite 2 years yet. I've made nearly 500 videos, and just the thousands of hours involved in just recording and editing and it takes some real dedication. It's one of the reasons why not just anybody can do this. But it's like anything else. It's like everything in life. You got to be committed. You got to have real commitment. And you got to have time. Time can be a problem. Let's see. I found it funny when Brian was saying he was going to leave. Brian, when I mentioned the YouTube channels, you're probably referring to Brian Lunduke. Maybe when he was leaving YouTube. I'm guessing that's what you were talking about there, Hoisting. Yeah, that was a while back, of course. He didn't stay gone long. Hey, DT. How do you justify text in R Markdown? Well, I don't use R Markdown, so maybe somebody else in the chat can help you, but I don't do anything in Markdown, really. Hoisting, yeah, so he was talking about Brian Lunduke. Yeah, Brian Lunduke lost all my respect after that, says Hoisting. That's a little harsh. Brian, of course, is trying to do YouTube for a living. He's trying to support him and his family, and he was just trying something out, seeing what worked. He's got to pay the bills, right? YouTube is his job, it's not his hobby. So you can't fault a guy for that. I write all the content for my site on Markdown to keep it consistent. Yeah. STS Tech. Brian is a tech entertainer. Yeah. Yeah, he is definitely entertaining. But I think that's why he has such a strong following. He's fun to listen to. Some of his old school stories about retro tech and his past as far as working at Microsoft and everything. They are interesting to listen to. Yeah, cheesy laughter is garbage. You're probably in the wrong place. If cheesy laughter is garbage, YouTube is really not the platform for you. Tax action. So, yeah, one of my favorite Linux YouTubers is Chris Titus. Yeah, Chris is great. I will probably check it out myself, what I need just to use Ubuntu. I'm not sure how you were responding to somebody else. Oh, Proxmox. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kill the stream. We've been going for about an hour and a half. Well, about an hour and 40 minutes. A little longer than what I wanted to stream, but that's okay, too. Yeah, Romy, thank you for doing your best. See ya. Thanks, Romy. Now, let's go ahead and shut it down. Of course, before I go, let me give a special thank you to these guys. This show was made possible by Ansem, Chris, the second Chris, Douglas, Dylan, Jack, Leor, Mitchell, Philip, Rob, Robert, Sam, Tony, and Willie, the producers of the show, my highest tier patrons over on Patreon. Without these guys, this live edition of Taking Into Account episode 46 would not have been possible. Also want to thank that long list of names you see on the screen that help support my work over on Patreon. Again, sincere thank you to each and every one of you guys. Appreciate each and every one of you. Those of you that are patrons of the channel, I'm thinking about doing a patrons only chat because I haven't done one for the month of June yet. We may do one Saturday. I will probably send out a notification sometime tonight, and I will try to pin down a time. I'm not exactly sure what time on Saturday, but probably Saturday, the day after tomorrow, we'll do the patrons only chat for the month of June. All right, guys. Peace.